faster than a speeding chew toy, more powerful than a belly rub. It's time to unleash Dear Watchers, an omniversal comic book podcast where we do a deep dive into the multiverse.
We are traveling with you through the stories and the worlds that make up an omniverse of fictional realities we all love. And roof roof! Your watchers on this journey are me, Guido.
And me, have I been a good boy? It's me, Rob! And before we begin our trip today on our leashes, I don't know what's new in our little section of the multiverse, Guido.
in our dog carrier, our pet carrier.
Exactly.
To the vet. There's so many places to go with a
not the vet
story. Well, Krypto wouldn't care about the vet.
Yes, that's true. Well, they couldn't. Their needles couldn't even penetrate him. He can't go for blood.
That's true. I'm sure they've found some other way, but if not, then that should be a comic. We want that to be a comic. Yeah. I don't think there's too much new. We're probably going to enter a season of Superman starting with this episode for a little bit. Maybe not. We haven't totally planned one, but it's on all of our minds with the trailer. And we should let people know we've not watched the trailer.
No.
So we're not spoiling the trailer at all with what is about to be discussed.
Yeah. We're going to be sending up an SOS, a season of Superman.
Yes. But then we have to quickly pivot to a season of Fantastic Four, a SOF. So
yeah, that one doesn't roll off the tongue nearly as well. There's no ABBA song with that one in the title.
We have a lot to do. And make sure you spay and neuter your cats and dogs.
Yes,
that's the important message. No, but it's fun talking about dogs. We're both pet owners, obviously. Yes. We have dogs. If we can get one to bark at the right time. They are rescue dogs. Everyone should rescue dogs.
And one of them is sitting in the room where I'm recording this right now. Well, now
and that one is Destructo. We've named our dogs based on today's characters, so we'll tell you more when we get into them.
Yes, but if you're joining us for the first time, we have 3 parts of our journey through the multiverse today: origins of the story, exploring multiversity, and pondering possibility. So thanks for coming along.
And remember, leave us a 5-star review where you're listening. Spread the word. Tell people about us. Find us on social media at Dear Watchers.
And with that, welcome to episode 160. And let's check out what's happening in the Omniverse with our travels today's alternate universe. And today we are begging and sitting, staying, and rolling over to answer the question, what if Superman's dog Krypto had an arch-nemesis, Destructo, the superhound of hate?
I love that phrase, the superhound of hate.
That was my nickname in high school.
So good. It really, I don't know, there's something about it that just works for me.
Yes.
So this Earth is sort of that weird in between imaginary Earth, the DC imaginary tales, but it's not quite an imaginary tale because it's during the era of the Silver Age when they're trying to tell canonical backstories for Superman. But let's assume it's not canonical, because if it was, it'd be weird.
Yes.
And we'll highlight a few things, as we always share with Superman and DC in general, but especially Superman episodes. While we both are big fans, we don't know all the ins and outs of the lore. Frankly, I don't think anyone can know all the ins and outs because it's so lengthy and been retconned so many times. So we'll see, but we can call this Earth Destructo. And we have talked Krypto briefly on a few episodes pretty recently when we covered Supergirl's cat and horse in episode 156, the horse that, of course, Lois Lane falls in love with. The horse, of course, that Lois Lane falls in love with, Mr. Ed. Yes, a horse is a horse. Oh, of course. And then on episode 152, Superman used Krypto to pretend to die in some Lois Lane hijinks.
And if you haven't listened to that one or read that issue, please do yourself a favor and check that out.
So those are episodes 152 and 156. And here we are a few episodes later, and it is time to focus in on everyone's favorite part of the Superman trailer. It sounds like Krypto.
So, Gita, what is your background with Superman's best friend. I guess that's not Jimmy, but Krypto.
No, Superman's pal is Jimmy, so Superman's
that's
best
true.
friend is Krypto. Yeah,
That's
a
true.
good. Yeah, he's got a girlfriend, a best friend, and a pal.
Yes.
So I think that Krypto, we talked about this a little bit with all the super pets. Krypto was absent for the vast majority of comics. And really only the last 20 years, I think, have creators tried to reintroduce him. So he shows up a bit in like the early 90s comics that I would have been reading of Superman, but really on the periphery. And I wasn't going back and
maybe
reading.
we'll talk about this in a moment, but that's not the Krypto that we will be discussing.
Right, there's
today.
different versions. Of course, there's different versions. It's DC. So
exactly.
My background though, it's what's funny is it's the same with everything Superman. Who knows why we know this, right? Like everyone, I bet our parents, like I bet your grandmother probably even knows Krypto, right? And why? Like, who knows? I have no idea why. I guess licensing and stuff. Because even Krypto, obviously, we know why Superman has proliferated, and it has to do with having a 1950s TV show and a radio serial before that people of all ages know Superman. But I don't know, like Krypto obviously wasn't in the George Reeves television show. Krypto wasn't in the Christopher Reeves movies. Like, I'm not sure why everyone would know who he is, but I think they do. And of course, I'm a part of that. And so I love dogs. I grew up with dogs my whole life, but never felt a particular affinity for Krypto because I never read a lot of good stories with him in them, nor did I go back and read some of the wacky stories with him in them like we did today. What is your background with Krypto?
Well, I think it's much the same as you. I knew of who Krypto was just through osmosis, as you were kind of describing. I wasn't a huge Superman reader, but when I was reading Superman around the death of Superman, the rebirth of Superman, all that era, yeah, I don't remember Krypto, even another Krypto being in those comics. So
I remember him at the funeral. That's all I remember.
Yeah,
it might even be like art. Like maybe he wasn't even there. I don't remember, but I remember it in art that like there's art of Krypto mourning.
I don't even recall that. So yeah, I was just a character that I was aware of, and then I think I mostly was familiar with him from being a big collector and reader of DC Who's Who, and I think they would definitely talk about all the super animals. And also in my head, I'm kind of combining some of those super animals with the Captain Marvel super animals, because don't they also have a whole bunch of like super animals wearing suits and stuff like that too?
They do. And then there's like, you're a fan of, I think, like Wacky Racers and some of those Hanna-Barbera animals that are all also somewhat similar almost looking. So I think there's a lot of super pets that have gone through different 1950s, 1960s media.
And then it was that movie, if we didn't know, we talked about this on our recent episode. It was really that recent movie about the super pets that kind of, I think, like put him back into the forefront of my mind, maybe in the forefront of James Gunn's mind, because I feel like, oh, then he was kind of front and center for the first time that I can remember.
Yeah. So,
well, let's go.
And you grew up with dogs too.
And I grew up with dogs. And in fact, the dog I had growing up was a white, like a medium-sized white dog. So very Krypto-esque.
But you never put a cape on him and tried to dress him up as Krypto?
Not that I can recall, but maybe I've lost that memory over time. Well, let us go back to the 1950s and meet Krypto for the first time. It's origins of the story.
Right now, on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions. Our amazing story begins a few years ago.
So I know we have some actual Krypto origin, and as Guido, you said, we're not experts on Superman, and everything has been rebooted. I was reading the Wikipedia, and it said, this is the final version, and then there was another section. It's like, no, this is the next version. And then it reverts back to that other version. It's like, oh, this is very complicated. But we'll go through some of that.
Everything DC that's been around for at least 40 years is very complicated. And we'll
I
get
also
to
have
his
some-
origin and creation. But before we do, I know there's some random trivia about his publication history, if you will,
Yes.
before we get into his origin issue.
Some very fun Krypto facts. I don't know if these will pop up in the movie. I doubt it. So, according to the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Cartoon Animals, and I don't think we have this book, but we have to get this.
But it sounds like a treasure.
It sounds like something we would definitely want. So while on Earth, Krypto poses as the Kent family dog Skip. I have never heard this, that he's also known as Skip. Had you?
No, that was new information to me. Maybe it only exists in that encyclopedia.
Exactly.
Or maybe that was like on the radio serial, or who knows? Who
Could be.
knows?
Well, because initially the Kents apply a brown dye patch on his back for a disguise, and Krypto burns it off with his heat vision when he goes into costume. That sounds very elaborate.
What's really interesting about that too is that means he has a bald spot every time he goes out as Krypto.
Well,
Like,
maybe
he's
it's
just got
on
a
the
patch
top
of
of the fur.
Well, then it looks like he shaved his fur in one spot on his
I
back.
guess so.
It's,
I don't
it's
know.
not the most well executed plan.
Well,
but I guess
that
he
is
a dog.
exactly why later the Kents devise a pull cord activated dye applicator and other
Don't even know what that
methods.
means.
No, which Krypto uses to switch from Skip and back and forth without human assistance. So I guess we can then see the dog like pulling a rope and like activating this dye somehow. Yeah, I don't know.
Very wacky.
And then I love this in Superboy issue 126 from 1966. We get a little bit of his family tree. So Krypto's father's name is given as Zipto, his grandfather is Nipto, and his great-grandfather is Vipto. I guess that's all on 23 and Z somewhere.
Well, and I guess the females of the family don't have the same naming conventions because it's all through the male lineage that he gets the Pateau part of his name.
Yes, exactly. Their
really
names are just
strange.
like Dolores or something like that. Yeah.
Does anyone have a dog named Dolores? I don't think.
Someone
I guess
has
this is
had to.
another planet, so I guess who
Exactly,
knows?
that's true.
This original Krypto, though, was removed from continuity, like most of DC's Silver Age, after a crisis on Infinite Earths. So we do end up with a bunch of new versions throughout the last 40 years. One in 1993 that Bibbo adopted and named, and this one had no superpowers, didn't appear after 2000. So then in 2001, there's another one introduced, which is a fake Krypton that Brainiac created, and had a dog was created in there and had the superpowers, but was standard dog intelligence. So I guess maybe that meant no thought bubbles. I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, the
reading
Krypto
those
we're going to talk about in a
comics.
bit is definitely super intelligent as well. Yes, yes.
And then I guess maybe later, I don't know, a later one is 2007 Action Comics that is a part of the L family on Krypton. And then, of course, Jeff Johns brings back a little bit of the origin of the Kryptonian canine of the House of L, who was eventually found and rescued by Clark as a boy, which retcons Krypto to be a little bit more like the Silver Age version. Then you have the New 52 and some Phantom Zone connection. And now he might live with Clark, Lois, and John and partner with Supergirl. But again, which version we have, it's some fusion of them. Whether or not it's matches the origin we're about to read I'm not sure if it's to be determined or not. It's anyone's guess, but let's get into his origin.
Yes, this is Adventure Comics Volume 1, Issue 210 from March 1955, entitled The Super Dog from Krypton.
It's written by Otto Binder, penciled by Curt Swan, inked by Seymour Barry, edited by Mort Weisinger. So you've got the real Silver Age Superman team here. Otto, of course, being a very prolific, famous writer, wrote apparently almost 5,000 comic stories, co-created Supergirl and the Phantom Zone, and relevant to this, Beppo the Super Monkey and Titano the Super Ape. He also is credited with the first imaginary tale for Lois Lane. So lots of DC legends come through Otto. And Curt Swan, we've discussed before, he is the Silver Age DC visionary. His art is DC. So great team here giving us the super dog from Krypton. But how do we get introduced to Krypton? Give us a summary of this issue.
Yes, so Superboy finds a white dog that has powers similar to his own and adopts him. But this dog has plenty of trouble chasing comets and ripping the steel off of bridges. Ultimately, Superboy discovers the spaceship the dog came to Earth in and realizes that this is his childhood dog, Krypto, that was launched from Krypton to find
Well, he doesn't realize it. He reads about it.
Yeah, he reads it in a letter from his own father, from Jor-El. And it just basically describes that Krypto is sent to find a new place to live because Jor-El knew that the planet was going to blow up. But Krypto's spaceship gets knocked off course. I don't know why he doesn't see him until now, but he does. And then in the end, Krypto explores the big backyard of space, leaving Superboy sad as he awaits the return of his new best friend.
Which happens only 4 issues later. So clearly this was popular and worked out well. But most of this issue is Superboy trying to figure out like how to contain Krypto, because no one can contain him. No one can chase after him. No one can leash him. So he like builds a whole doghouse out of stones and tries to keep him contained that way, but fails to do so. And that's why I think they had to sort of write him into space at the end, because the whole issue is making out that he is so impossible to deal with. But this is a perfectly quintessential, ridiculous Silver Age story.
Because there's no villain or adversary or anything like that. It's basically Superboy Clark dealing with like everyday Archie Andrew problems, only instead of like having a rambunctious dog he's just adopted, it's one that can also chase after comets and like burrow into rocks and do all these different things.
No, I think the conflict in this, and this is probably pretty representative of this era. I mean, they had villains obviously, but we're in the post Seduction of the Innocent era. Lana is,
oh yes, the villain is female. She's the antagonist.
We've talked many times, and we're going to talk in the next issue about how the plotting sometimes on these Silver Age DC books, what makes them so good is it's not simple, but it's not logical either. So it's almost like people just truly, I think we said this on a previous episode, had a dartboard and would throw things at it and decide that's the plot. And in this, it's because Lana sees him carrying the steel girder that Krypto went to grab off the building. Lana sees Superboy carrying the steel girder and realizes you couldn't, or sees Clark carrying it, and is like, you couldn't have carried that unless you're Superboy. You must be Superboy. So the conflict of the issue, if you will, in addition to trying to contain Krypto, is that Lana now knows his secret. So he does 2 things before the end of the issue to make sure that Lana doesn't know the secret or questions it. One, he has this really light ladder. He calls a magnesium ladder. I don't know. I guess it's like
real things, right?
I guess it's like an aluminum ladder like we have now. I guess it was a new thing. So he's carrying it as if to look like he's really strong, and then he tosses it her way. And then he has Krypto fly overhead chasing a boomerang, but so far away that she can't quite make out that it's not Superboy, and she thinks it's Superboy in the sky, and is like, oh, sorry, I now realize I was wrong. You're not Superboy.
Well, and that actually is how Krypto now gets the cape, because up to that point he doesn't have the cape. But now Superboy has put the cape on Krypto, and I guess that's kind of establishing like the Krypto look that we have. But yeah, there's all these things where like, yeah, he throws her this like light ladder, but she doesn't even think that he was holding a ladder before. She then says, oh, they also make building material out of this super light material, so that must have been what you were holding. Where did that thing go where did the light magnesium girder go when she saw him before? We'll never know.
the plotting is just ridiculous. And then Krypto's antics are the other fun part. So again, that's kind of the conflict is Lana. But the fun part is the antics. I mean, I love at one point that he decides he needs, like, they're trying to give us a sense of how different, if you will, Krypto is. So in order to scrub him, like, he can't use a sponge, so he has to use barbed wire that he found in order to clean Krypto. And he can't give him a bath in water, which this makes no sense. He gives him a bath in molten lava.
Yes.
So it's just like all these ridiculous details to illustrate, I guess, how difficult this dog would be to manage for Superboy.
And you have to be careful even when Krypto wags its tail, because its tail is capable of breaking a rock in two. That's like how strong it is. And I guess they needed to have it good. Kind of the ending really reads of like, okay, we're going to introduce this idea. Maybe we just didn't have an idea for this issue, so we're going to throw a dog into it. And then the ending like really reads of like, yes, as you said, like we can't always have Superboy also worrying about this dog. I feel like we've seen so many sitcoms where suddenly they introduce a dog and it's like, we got to deal with this dog.
And they might
now.
mention it one other time, but then
So they wanted to get rid of it, but then I'm sure they were like had letters pouring in. It's like, oh my God, Krypto is the best thing ever. We need to have him back. And then, as you said, he comes back a few issues later.
Well, the other thing, as we've talked about, that makes this so weird canonically and why we are looking at it all is they probably also, all this weirdness of their fact that they're telling these stories of Superboy when we've spent 30 years at this point in our life with Superman. So they're going back and telling these stories of Superboy as if he was Superboy in Smallville, which just contradicts everything about Superman anyway. And so they probably were like, because I started thinking, how are they going to explain that there's not a dog? Superman doesn't have a dog. So they're going to have to explain Krypto dying but in 1955, I also realized they're not going to put that in a comic. So I wasn't sure how they deal with that. So I think that's the other aspect of having him like be part-time in space, part-time on Earth, is it could be the explanation for why we never met him until now.
Yeah. I also love, I was just looking, Otto Binder was 44 when he wrote this. So I always love picturing these guys because they were 44. He's probably wearing a full suit writing this, chain smoking. Maybe he had like a cocktail there, and he's like writing these stories about, it's gonna be a superpowered dog. Yeah, that's the one. Because he's writing 5,000 stories. It's like he's gotta be knocking these things out.
He does. It's true. So it's a fun introduction to Krypto. It's a fun idea. I see why they brought him back, and it's cute. It gives for some clever twists on plots that were probably not things you could do without having a little dog around. Plus, people love dogs.
Yes,
pets,
exactly.
So.
Well, let's see the continuing adventures of Krypto. It's time for exploring multiversity.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
So this is Superboy, Volume 1, Issue number 92 from October 1961, entitled Krypto's Arch-Enemy.
Yes, but I prefer the Superhound of Hate. Where that came from is that this was reprinted a few years later in an annual, and on that cover they call it the Superhound of Hate. So I'm going to go with the Superhound of Hate for the title. So while this is 6 years later, no big surprise, we've still got Otto Binder writing this story.
I'm still writing these stories here, kids.
More dogs. And this one, as we know, Silver Age DC did not put credits in their books, so credits are sometimes hard to come by. But we do know the artist on this, who was the penciler and the inker, is George Papp, who is best known for this series, this long-running Superboy series. And he also co-created Green Arrow, Bizarro, General Zod, and Congo Bill and Phantom Zone with Otto Binder. And his final comic was in 1968. So he was working on DC till the very end.
Until he asked for some benefits, and they said, "Sorry, George, you're fired." But that was
yeah. So not too different as a company. And this, why don't you give us a very brief summary? Because I think we have a lot to talk about in terms of Destructo, the superhound of hate.
High overview here. To take revenge on Superboy, Lex Luthor gives superpowers to his own dog, Wolf, transforming him into Destructo, the superhound of hate. With Superboy off-world, Destructo frames Krypto for various crimes, leading our beloved Superdog to find out what is really going on and, of course, ultimately save the day.
Okay. There's so much, and all very good and fun to have. But again, this is like the last issue we read. This is supposed to be taking place in the past. We're reading a story of Lex and Clark growing up in Smallville. So let's start with why Lex wants revenge.
It's a shallow version to take revenge. So Lex was doing an experiment on Kryptonite, and he's a friend of Superboy's. He wants to help him. Superboy thinks that there's a fire. He does his magic breath, and it makes the experiment go haywire and causes Lex to lose all his hair.
But here's the thing. This is, again, the dartboard at the plot thing. He doesn't just make the experiment go haywire. It's that he gets the fire out or the smoke cleared, but by his super breath, the wind coming in, smashed a bottle of acid against a bottle of kryptonite antidote that he was working on. And the two combined created fumes that made all of his hair fall out.
Yeah.
And he knows he'll be bald for the rest of his life. So it's like, it's so convoluted. It couldn't just be something simple. It was like, no, let's figure out the most complex, complicated way of expressing this ridiculous plot.
Yeah.
And
it
Superman
is
fans
odd.
can tell us if this is canon, but I don't think this ever became canon, that Lex's whole agenda is, you made me bald with your super breath.
One of the greatest criminal minds of all time, and he's driven mad by the fact that he lost his hair. No, toupee, hair transplant, all those. That's out the window. No. So then, what Lex wants to do is, of course, I feel like we see this plot. I think we've seen this plot with Lex whenever we've covered him. Lex wants to give himself superpower, so he creates a ray, which of course very conveniently can only be used once ever.
Right. I love that his explanation is something like, the superpower ray machine was the result of a freak combination of adjustments I'll never be able to duplicate.
No, never.
One-time use.
Yes, never. And of course, right when he triggers it, his dog Wolf, which we've never ever seen before and never will see again, has jumped in front of the ray, and now... Actually, then Lex goes to hit the dog because he's that kind of guy.
He
goes to hit the dog and hurts his hand, and then realizes, Wolf now has all these superpowers. He's basically like the evil Krypto.
Yeah, and how does he train Wolf? Well, the most reasonable way to train a dog with superpowers, he projects images of bones into the sky to train him to fly. It is completely ridiculous. And then he fires cannonballs at him, directly at him.
Yes.
I mean, it's just asinine.
And then they've conveniently worked out that Superboy is off-world because there's a planet that's gonna blow up, and Superboy has to transport the entire population of this planet to another planet. So that's taking him quite a while. And in the meantime, he's left Krypto on Earth to basically handle any accidents and crimes that happen there. So he's there. And this Krypto, we should say, now this isn't true of the Krypto we just talked about in his origin issue, but now this Krypto, not only does he have Superman's powers, but he definitely is much smarter than a dog. He can really reason things out, and we actually see his thought bubbles. So he can't speak, but we know what he's thinking most of the time, and that's not true in his origin issue. He's much more like a regular dog in that first one. He's chasing comets like they're cats. Here, now he's very smart.
Yes, and Destructo has the same powers. So
Yeah,
Destructo,
same powers, and we can
you're
also
following
hear
a lot of
him.
Destructo's
Yes.
inner monologue as
Yes.
he embarks on his superhound of hate career. And then even, I mean, just the idea that he's written this issue to be really about the two dogs is hilarious enough. But then the fact that he's going to frame Krypto is completely asinine. And one of the crimes he's committing to frame him is, again, like, you just, I can't figure out how this was plotted by a sober human being. And
we don't know
because...
that. So, not to besmirch Otto's name, but he's
because
long. It's okay.
So his framing of Krypto depends on the fact that he'll commit crimes and be only seen from afar wearing a red cape. But he's a brown dog. So
yes,
there's a concern that if you see him too close, you're going to realize it's not Krypto. So at one point, he's robbing the Superboy Museum, and he's too close.
Too.
Which is the thing. So I can't even explain this truly. He decides that in order to commit the crime and have people think he's Krypto, he will have to melt down a metal statue of Superboy, and he'll have to dive into the molten metal so that he can become covered in metal, which I guess makes him look white enough, close enough to Krypto, but also he happens to be stealing a magnet. And so he's able to attract the magnet by flying past the window, and therefore he doesn't have to even go into the museum where it'll be clear he's not actually Krypto. I mean, I really, like, I can't believe someone came up with that story. I can't believe it.
Yeah. And then all this time, the real Krypto doesn't know what's going on, and then suddenly the real Krypto is like landing back in and like sees the chief of police, and then everyone's scared of him, and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" I don't know. And the real chief of police even tries to like incapacitate him with a piece of kryptonite, but it's too small, which does come back later, and then Krypto actually escapes. He actually then like burrows into a little hidey hole.
Does. He digs a hole into a rock so that he can go hide in it, and he's like depressed at this point because everyone hates him.
But he's using then his super hearing and stuff to hear what everyone is saying, and then is realizing, oh, there's a dog that's committing these crimes. They think it's me. So now he's like, oh, I need to clear my doggy name. Which he does next in a very absurd way. You can
This is, I know, because it just gets better. Like, as if I'm going to dip myself in molten metal to disguise myself and attract a magnet isn't good enough. At this point, we get an explanation that, so he ends up getting, so Lex ends up somehow being able to reconfigure this magical machine that he could only configure once, but he configures it to take away powers. So he takes away Krypto's powers, and they end up going into Destructo. So Destructo has twice the amount of super dog powers, and Krypto is now just a normal dog. And before I explain how Krypto defeats this doubly powerful superhound of hate, can you please describe Krypto's suffering of being a normal dog?
Yeah, so the Destructo like launches him in. Luckily, he almost dies. Luckily, he lands on some hay, which we know, so he's very happy about that. And then now he's of course forced to walk, and even then a bystander sees Krypto walking along. A farmer
laughs at him,
and Krypto is like, "Oh my gosh, how humiliating! I must have to walk now."
It's so crazy that this is an actual panel there where a farmer is saying, "Ha ha, not flying, walking like an ordinary dog." Like that's what he's making fun of him for. So anyway, this now humiliated Krypto has figured out that because Destructo is twice as strong, he will be twice as vulnerable to kryptonite, which I don't think also ever comes back again, because that really makes no sense. But regardless, it's what it takes to make this story work. So he gets the small little pebble of kryptonite that didn't affect a single strength dog. It starts to incapacitate Destructo, and so Lex realizes that in order to save Destructo, he'll have to return Krypto's powers so that Destructo only has single level superpowers and therefore can resist the kryptonite. So that happens. Krypto gets his powers back, and Superboy arrives just in time to save the day.
Yes. Well, yeah, to put Lex into juvenile hall.
Yes, he's returning him to juvenile hall, to reform school. Yeah,
to reform school. But I think you left out how Krypto is able to alert all of the authorities of this, because it is also very bizarre, because he knows where Lex is hiding there. So what Krypto does, again, now without his superpowers, is he breaks into the Kent family general store, steals a bag of money.
I did ignore this.
Steals a bag of money, rips a hole in the money so that some coins are falling out of it. And then the police chief sees, there's Krypto stealing this money. I'm going to follow this trail of money. And then he leads with those breadcrumbs to Lex's thing. Now, why couldn't have Krypto done anything else? Why couldn't he have just
literally anything else? Anything.
That police chief could have followed him. That's all he needed. He didn't need to rob his own family store and lead this money. Did someone then collect this money? Is the Kent family out of all this change now?
It is. You're right. I should have included it, but yes. I had to choose the ridiculous plot twists, and that is another great one.
Yeah.
And then it ends with a panel where Superboy is so proud of Krypto, but he's wagging his tail too fast, and so Superboy is really worried that Krypto is going to start a tornado, and that's how the story ends. So this is perfect.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. I love every bit of it. I truly, I know I've said this when we've covered these ridiculous imaginary stories, but I truly can't believe someone wrote this. I think I have a new goal, which is to write a story like this, because I just don't even know. Again, you need a dartboard, I think, equipped with 40 different plot twists, and that's what you use to guide the story. Big bottle of scotch.
And a lot of deadlines. The deadline is very important here.
True.
Bumped out of 5,000 stories.
So you enjoyed this also?
Very much, yes. Now, I think you had said, though, because, of course, we're not going to talk about the further adventures of Destructo. Yes, he also loses his powers. But Destructo, I believe, Wolf, never comes back, right?
No.
He's gone.
No, this is his only appearance, which seems really strange because, this series goes on for another 150 issues. So they could easily have found the chance to bring him back, but guess Otto only had one dog versus dog story in him.
Yeah. Well, let us wrap up by going into the future and pondering some possibilities.
Will the future you describe be averted?
So, Guido, what are we talking about for pondering possibilities?
Well, let's ponder the summer release of Superman and Krypto's role in it, because, again, we haven't watched the trailer. We did watch the teaser from a few months back, so we know Krypto was in that. We know people loved it, but we know Krypto is again in this trailer, and people are loving every second of it. We also know that supposedly Krypto is in Supergirl, which just wrapped filming and comes out next year. So we are all in on Krypto in this new universe. And I'm just curious what we think Krypto's role will be and how important will it be. Should it align to this origin? Now we know Krypto's actual origin. So I don't know. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with the origin, because I think origins are always a good place to start. I think they are going to stick semi-closely to the comic book origin, but I think the big difference here, so I think Krypto will be from Krypton and all that, but I think the big difference is going to be that Krypto will be traveling with baby Kal-El in the pod. Maybe he's put in there because they don't want to separate him, or maybe he's there to protect him once he gets to Earth, like be a protector. I could totally see that. But I think it makes a lot more sense for them to be together rather than like that he's introduced later, which is also very convenient. Like, how else is this pod also landing on Earth, like with another creature from Krypton?
It's ridiculous Silver Age stuff too.
Yeah.
The idea that like they're retconning this dog was also sent and happened to be his own dog.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think
So
there's
what do you
no
think
way.
of that?
Yeah, I think that has to be it. I think there's no other way, because there's no other way. Also, you need the superpowered dog. So unless it's a dog that's a product of like a science experiment, which seems like a ridiculous alternate history to provide. Like, there's no reason to go down that path when you could just have him be from Krypton. And I mean, I guess if you wanted, I don't think they're going to go into a scientific explanation, but I guess the same explanation we have for Superman, right? He has this alien genetic structure where the yellow sun gives him superpowers. So I guess you could assume all mammals on
I think so.
Krypton had the same thing be true of them. And therefore, Krypto, the normal dog on Krypton, is Krypto, the super dog on Earth. So
it also establishes their relationship. So if Clark, as we know him in most of the movie, is 30, then he's been, and Krypto, I'm sure, like lives much longer than a normal dog, right? Like, I think like then he's been with Clark for all those 30 years, so they had that chance to bond. It's not like, oh, I need to meet this other dog in the course of the film and establish another relationship. Like, this is a very shorthand, like, oh, it's my dog, it's my best friend, they've always been together.
Yeah. So can he talk? No.
No.
Do you
I
think
mean, I don't.
Can we hear his thoughts in James Gunn's universe?
I don't think so. But I think that hints on something that is kind of in the same vein, which is like, I think the very appearance of Krypto. Yes, even if you don't like hear his thoughts or he talks or anything like that, but the very fact that he is in here to me says that there is going to be some, not maybe the Silver Age silliness, but some of that kind of Silver Age DNA. Because I think as soon as you put like a dog wearing a cape into a movie, it's like, oh, that's a certain tone. Like that's
yeah,
it's,
it
of
makes
course
it
very
fun,
different than the
which-
Zack Snyder tone.
Totally.
Too.
I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think James Gunn needs to obsess over differentiating from Zack Snyder. I think it's going to be differentiated regardless. But I do think that's part of it. It's definitely a signal of this is fun, this is comic booky, this is faithful. It's a faithful adaptation. So I think that all of those things are indicated by his presence, which is really nice. And I think, of course, there's also the James Gunn heartstring piece of it. He's already said that he was really inspired by his own dog,
Yes.
who he was bonding with while writing this during the pandemic. And so, you know, even people who don't love dogs even people who don't have dogs generally love dogs.
Yes.
So, like, there's the piece that it pulls us in and humanizes Superman in a way, which is really key. So.
And that gives me also hope that they're not just going to kill Krypto off in this movie, because I think you and I liked Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but I think a lot of people, including myself, would say like there's a lot of manipulation by, well, we're going to put some cute animals in it and then kill them. Spoiler alert for that movie. So I think, and it's like there's a famous screenwriting book called Save the Cat. It's like the way to establish a hero is have them save a cat. And it's like the way to establish a villain is like kill an animal, right? So I think like it would be a lot, and maybe going into that Snyder territory if like someone snaps Krypto's neck in this movie.
Lex goes after
like,
Krypto.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like
you
I
get
would
Destructo.
like to,
We're gonna have Destructo in this movie.
Destructo. So yeah, I love the idea that like, you know, Krypto is not just going to be used for like that emotional manipulation, and the fact that he's based on James Gunn's own dog makes me think, oh no, that's not going to be the case here.
No, he's not going to be a storytelling device. He's going to be a character, and he's going to be a dog, but he's going to be a character. And I think, I don't know anything about Supergirl. I don't read rumors or anything, so could be take place in the past, but the fact that Krypto is supposedly in it, that makes me hope he survives. Again, maybe Supergirl takes place on Krypton, and so it gives us no indication about the future, but I'm just excited that we will see him a few times and get to see what's in store for the good boy.
And I think, like, we all know that with, like, well, like with Batman, there's like a tendency now to like make it like feel realistic. Like, how could someone actually be this if they were a billionaire? But with Superman, there is always like this hurdle, I think, to overcome with a modern audience, where it's like, how doesn't you put on glasses and everyone thinks you're somebody else? Like, it's on this like ridiculous, and he can do basically anything. So I think like having the idea of like, okay, then he also has a dog with a cape who follows him around. Like, it just,
You can suspend disbelief.
You suspend disbelief, exactly.
Yeah, it's a good point. It turns it into a fantasy where you can suspend disbelief and just appreciate it and enjoy it. That's true. It also gives them a little bit of a family element. I don't think we're going to get a John Kent anytime soon, and so I think it gives Clark and Lois the chance to have a dog and be kind of a family, and that's cute.
Now, I mean, I know they're probably not going to be able to have well, Krypto's going to fly and do all these other things, and you and I have only seen like the teaser there, but how do you feel about it being a CGI dog versus like the movies we grew up with where it was like Air Bud or something like that?
The
or
Adventures
Eddie
of
on
Milo
Frasier,
and
where
Otis?
it's like, exactly, Milo and Otis, where it's like a real dog. And of course, like as a dog lover, an animal lover, human being, like you just like, oh my God, that's a dog on screen. Like you bond with it. Here, you go in knowing, okay, that's CGI. Do you think that's going to be a hurdle that you have to overcome as a viewer?
Not if it's well executed, and my guess is, and what tends to be true for all of these movies, is that even the trailer effects are not the final effects.
True.
They've obviously polished the trailer to get it looking really good, but the movie will oftentimes look even better. And so I think the trailer looked good, and I think the movie will look even better. So I think it's not going to matter, even if you can tell, obviously, that it's CG and not real most of the time, much of the time, some of the time. I think it's not going to matter, because I'm sure that what they're going to capture, because James Gunn is the director and has this the visual sense of it, is the things that dog people would be looking for, like the way the eyes work and connect to you and look up at you, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. I think they're going to capture, and so it's going to feel real, even if it never is or looks completely real. Yeah. So I'm very excited. I'm sure they're going to merchandise the hell out of it.
Yes.
And I'm sure I'm going to fall victim to that. So
Yeah. And Otto Binder's legacy lives on.
Yes.
And you know, that was just making me think, you know, as we wrap up here, I have our dog Archie sitting next to me here, but do you remember Archie's original name was Otto?
Otto. Oh my gosh.
His name was Otto.
Get out. I did not remember that during the course of this episode. And wow, it was Otto when we adopted him, and we did change it.
Maybe those other people were big Krypto fans and named him after Otto Binder.
I don't think the hoarding house he was living in with 35 other dogs in Texas where he was rescued, I don't think they were naming him after Otto Binder, but who knows? So wow. All right. Well, that's really fun. And we are so excited for Superman coming up, and we're excited to see what probably Superman story we cover in our next episode. But for now, that is a wrap. Dear Watchers, thank you for listening. I've been Vito. Ruff, ruff.
And I have been Rob, the good boy.
The reading list is in the show notes. Follow us online at Dear Watchers.
And leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. We'll be back soon with another trip through the multiverse.
In the meantime, keep pondering the possibilities.